Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with WRAL state government reporter Travis Fain, we're talking about some big legislative news that happened Wednesday. We're recording this episode shortly after lawmakers ended the state's long-standing pistol permit requirement. They did this by overturning Governor Roy Cooper's veto to the bill, which is in itself a big deal and part of the political story behind this whole situation. Travis, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, let's just break this down piece by piece. What does this new legislation say about purchasing handguns, and how is it different from the longstanding permit law that we've had in this state?
All right. So up until this, if you want to buy a handgun as opposed to a rifle or a shotgun, you have to go and you have to get a pistol permit from your local sheriff. So you have to go and basically get the sheriff's permission to do it. The idea is that the sheriff does a background check, but also, maybe knows things that would not be in a standard background check, such as, boy, we sure have to come out to your house a lot to deal with domestic violence situations. Maybe you don't need to have a gun. So that's going to go away. The Sheriff's Association in this state had, after years of protecting this system, said last couple of years, we don't think this is needed anymore. The federal background check you do when you go to a gun store and buy a gun, that is sufficient. There's some loopholes that Democrats were worried about that we can talk a little bit more about. And also a number of Democratic sheriffs, including Wake County Sheriff, Durham Sheriff, they wanted to keep the pistol permit process in place. So you kind of had this situation where urban county sheriffs, Democrats wanted to keep it, but Republican sheriffs around the state wanted to let it go. And of course, the state legislature controlled by Republicans.
So is there anything else in this bill of note besides getting rid of the permit process?
The pistol permit is the big thing. The number two thing is you're not allowed to carry guns in schools. But what about churches that are also schools? So a lot of churches, of course, have a private school. And there is something in this bill that would allow parishioners to carry their concealed carry handguns into a church service, even if it's on what is otherwise a school campus, as long as it's not during school hours. So not while classes are meeting, not while students are doing extracurricular activities like sports, but just when it's the church. Because, you can carry a handgun into a church now if the church allows it. This is to extend that to churches that are also schools.
Understood. So it sounds like this was a vote that fell along party lines. And it's important to note that some of the Democrats that could have changed the way this vote went missed the voting. So that was a pretty big deal.
That's right. So in the state Senate, Republicans have a supermajority, meaning they can overturn the governor's vetoes on bills like this one without any Democrats coming along. But in the House, they're one shy. Republicans are one shy of that supermajority. Now, that means they either have to get one Democrat to vote with them, or since the supermajority math is based on the total number of members who are present and voting on a given day, a few Democrats can be absent. And this morning, 3 Democrats were absent, which allowed Republicans to vote this thing through.
And so this was historical politically, and explain why.
Because this is the first veto of Governor Roy Cooper's that has been overridden since back in the 2018 elections. Republicans for many years had supermajorities in both the House and Senate, so they could overturn the governor at will as long as all the Republicans were together. That supermajority got broken in the 2018 elections, and since then, I believe something like 47 vetoes had been upheld because the Democrats stuck together. But again, today, 3 Democrats weren't there. Sometimes we refer to that in legislative parlance as taking a walk. Not being there for a vote that you don't want to be there for. But at least 2 of them have said they had medical reasons for not being there.
Well, we will be back after the break with more from WRAL's Travis Fain about people's very serious concerns about this legislation, especially in light of the shooting this week in Nashville. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with WRAL's Travis Fain about some big legislative news in the North Carolina General Assembly. They have overturned the requirement for gun permits in North Carolina, and there are some concerns about this. You know, it's hard, Travis, to ignore the backdrop for this moment in history. I mean, gun violence is happening across the country daily. We've seen mass shootings. We're just coming off the tragic events at the school in Nashville, where 3 administrators and 3 students were killed by a shooter who broke into that school. What are people in North Carolina, the lawmakers and others, telling you about their concerns about getting rid of this permit process?
So getting rid of the permit process treats a handgun purchase just like a rifle or a shotgun purchase has been treated, meaning you don't have to go and get that piece of paper from your local sheriff to do it. You still, if you buy it from a federally licensed dealer, so a gun store, you still have to go through what's called a NICS check, federal background check here that people are probably familiar with. And then the question is, well, does that catch everything? And what the gun rights supporters will tell you is that, yes, it's absolutely sufficient. It catches everything. But North Carolina has this weird quirk in the way it defines domestic violence in state law that has not passed muster with federal courts. So a lot of domestic violence charges, misdemeanors, do not necessarily get caught in that background check. So there's a question about whether or not that's a pretty big loophole that's going to be an issue for these handgun purchases. The other one is private sales. So if I sell you a gun or you sell me a gun, neither one of us is a federally licensed dealer. We are not required to do a background check. But up until now, the law would have required us for the buyer to go and have this pistol permit before we did that private sale. So there's a question of, does that open up a loophole? And then there's also the question of, how many people were abiding by that anyway, if they were buying a gun from a stranger or from a friend, as opposed to going through
And so,
a gun
so
store.
historically, you got that permit from a sheriff's office. You mentioned a little bit in the beginning of the show that some sheriffs are for it, some are against it. So it sounds like a mixed bag.
Yeah, and I mean, we got 100 counties in North Carolina. Most of the sheriffs are for it. But again, in our population centers, those sheriffs, I spoke to Mecklenburg County Sheriff today. I spoke to Durham County Sheriff today, and they're incensed about this and really feel like that they know best and don't want to see this power eroded from the sheriff's office.
And I'm assuming the governor's not responding well to this development.
He sent out a statement. He tweeted that without any debate allowed by GOP leadership, because that's the other part here, that this thing moved really fast this morning. House went into session at 9:30, and Republicans, because they have the numbers, shut down the debate, took their vote, moved on with their lives. So the governor's saying without debate, because the arguments were too compelling for Republicans to hear, the House voted to override my veto and eliminate strong background checks for handguns. Allowing known domestic abusers and mentally ill people to buy handguns puts communities at risk, is what the governor tweeted this morning.
But of course, there are people who support this change, and that includes the National Rifle Association. They weighed in today. Their leaders weighed in. What are they saying?
Yeah, they said that the check, the permit that the sheriff issued served no public purpose, that it's redundant to the background check that you use when you buy a gun at a gun store, and that law-abiding citizens should not have to ask government permission to exercise their Second Amendment rights.
And finally, when and how does this take effect?
Immediately. We got within 30 minutes or an hour of the law passing over the governor's veto this morning, the press release from the Alamance County Sheriff saying, all right, not only are we not doing any more pistol permits, we're not even going to process the ones that are in the queue, because one of the things that was in this law, most laws as they pass will have an effective date. This part of the law, the pistol permit part of this law, which was Senate Bill 41, for those who want to read it, said that it would be effective the moment it became law. So as of now, you don't have to get a pistol permit anymore.
Well, thank you so much, Travis, for sharing all this and explaining the intricacies of this law and how it is going to affect the people here in North Carolina. And please tune in to WRAL's On the Record at 7 o'clock on Saturday night, where your host and anchor, Lena Tillett, will be talking to experts about school safety. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and making us part of your morning routine. If you like what you're hearing, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or on whatever podcast app you're using. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email waiting in your inbox every morning with Triangle news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.